The name of the presentation is Evaluation of Ontario's Enhanced Senior Driver Renewal Program. And we have Frances Ilari with us today. Frances is the Senior Safety Research Advisor with the Ontario Ministry of Transportation. And she has an impressive resume of things that she's done. So she's held this position since October of 2013. Before that, she was with the Driver Improvement Office for more than 10 years as a medical analyst and senior medical analyst in the medical review section. And she developed obviously strong analytical skills to assess the relationship between medical conditions and road safety trends and practices. Even before coming to that office, she was often called upon to prepare and present complex statistical data and assess the impact of program initiatives and policy directions related to driver medical fitness and risk to road safety. Frances was a key member of a team that led Ontario's implementation of a reciprocal agreement between Canada and the U.S. affecting commercial drivers with specific medical conditions. And in her role in the research office, Frances has also been the lead on coordinating and finalizing data for the Ontario Road Safety Annual Report. She's also the research lead on key files including speeding, street racing, medical issues, young novice drivers, and seniors. And finally, Frances has a BA in Psychology and Rehabilitation Services from York University and a National Medical Training Certificate. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Frances.
It really is an honor and a pleasure to be here today to share with you a really good news story from Ontario, and particularly because we are a leader in road safety, as I know many of you look to Ontario, but really this is a good news story to share with all of you and have you hopefully have some takeaways from the results of our preliminary analysis of our program. So the purpose for today is we're actually going to take a look at the cognitive screening tools that we've just recently implemented in our Senior Driver Renewal Program, and really to determine, are these tools effective in identifying the right drivers? We'll go through a little bit of a background of the previous program. We'll talk a little bit about why we decided to make that change, and then really give you a status summary on what we found so far, looking at the in-class screening component, what that entails, the road test referrals and the results of those, and also the referrals to our medical review program, and then we'll wrap up with some conclusions. So we all know this in all your jurisdictions that the aging population, the population is aging, and seniors are driving longer. If you take a look at the Ministry of Finance projections, the number of people aged 80 and over is projected to more than double in size, from about 500,000 to over 1.3 million. From 2012 to 2036. And when people are living longer, they're of course driving longer. So we also see that our licensed driver population is growing from over 270,000, to over 710,000 in Ontario by 2036. There's a relationship between age and crash risk. We know that seniors in Ontario are about, when compared to drivers of all other ages, they're about twice as likely to be involved in an at-fault collision. Of course, natural and age-related declines affect your functional ability to drive, so visual and perceptual problems. Your ability to see, to scan, to interpret the driving environment, it all becomes less refined with age. You're less sensitive to light, you may have a restricted visual field, and of course there's cataracts, glaucoma, and all those fun things that come with aging. Cognitive abilities, even in the absence, even if you don't have dementia or Alzheimer's, your cognitive abilities do decline with age, and we know that. You experience challenges with attention, with memory, spatial cognition, and of course motor skills. We all have those aches and pains as we get older, but just imagine those with osteoarthritis, limited range in your knees, your hands, your ankles, feet. It can all make your driving task really difficult, hard to press the brake, grip the steering wheel, executing really precise movements. So these are all things affecting our ability to drive as we get older. And of course, medications affecting your ability to drive. A lot of our seniors are taking multiple medications, which can contribute to sedation, psychomotor retardation. Okay, so if we actually look at Ontario's program, Ontario was the first jurisdiction in North America to mandate vision and knowledge testing for senior drivers. From October 1996, till about April 20th, 2014. The licensing process was only required every 2 years. Okay, the vision and knowledge test remained in place. We had some changes, some program enhancements with respect to the GS presentation. We had our driver improvement counselors, which facilitate the group education sessions. We updated them with some new curriculum. But really the changes, the phenomenal changes happened just this last April. We replaced the knowledge test with cognitive screening tools. And prior to this new change, road test referrals were really at the discretion of the driver improvement counselor at the group education session. They would look at the seniors that were participating, and if there was observed non-participation, then they would be referred to a road test. If there was language barriers as well, they would be also referred to a road test. So after April 20th, so April 21st and beyond, it was a more objective way of determining whether or not our seniors were needed to undergo a road test. It was based on the results of the cognitive screening, and it wasn't based on some subjective feeling that the driver perhaps needed to go for a road test. So that was, that the new curriculum as well was a little bit more relevant, looking at issues like the effects of drugs on driving as well, and other important changes that we can go through later. So prior to implementing this program, we did have some consultants retained to take a look at our previous program. What worked? What didn't work? What could we do to enhance the program? And of course, what they found when they did the research was that the knowledge test performance has no predictive value. What I mean by that is that regardless of whether they passed or failed the knowledge test, their driver performance it declined. So whether it was a suspension, whether it was a conviction, whether it was a collision, it had no predictive value. So pass or fail, they had poor driving performance. Okay? Now, in terms of what are good indicators in crash involvement for convictions, demerit points on a driver's record. That's what they found. Failing a road test on the first attempt. So really, the key message here was that the knowledge test, it was not telling us anything. It wasn't accurately identifying the right drivers. We need to look closely at our demerit points and failing a road test. The next consultant report we had commissioned was our meta-analysis on the cognitive screening tools. So if we're now going to use these cognitive screening tools, we need to make sure that these tools are based on peer-reviewed scientific research. So there was over 400 peer-reviewed articles evaluating the reliability and the validity of the cognitive screening tools. From there, we deduced 14 tools that were based on relevance for fitness to drive. Then we went down to 6, and that was determined on whether or not there was more operational feasibility there. So looking at the duration, was it less than 10 minutes? In a group setting, because Ontario does have a group education setting. Were there any computer or hardware requirements? Paper and pencils, more cost efficient, easier to administer. The expertise required. Our driver improvement counselors are not medical professionals. We needed something that could be administered by our driver improvement counselors. And of course, again, feasibility. They're simple and easy to score. Then we whittled it down to another 2, based on predictive ability and zero cost impact. So these were the 2 that were selected, the clock drawing test and the single letter cancellation test. Now they do measure 2 different cognitive abilities. Clock drawing test measures visual spatial ability. And what I mean by that is that's the ability to recognize, and organize information when you see something and you interpret what you see. So when you're driving, you need to be able to stay in a lane. You need to assess the space entering the traffic flow. You need to detect other objects on the road. You need to judge distances and find your way to your destination. Now, the letter cancellation test is more about psychomotor speed, the amount of time that it takes to process a signal, prepare a response, execute that response. So what does that mean for driving? So think about the car. You need to press the brake, accelerate, turn the steering wheel. You need to see if there's a pedestrian. You need to be able to recognize that pedestrian and react to that pedestrian. Just some examples. So before we actually get into the results, just want to give you the status up front. And as I said, realizing that we have had a lot of eyes on Ontario because we are the first jurisdiction in the world to introduce an in-class screening component as part of routine driver license renewal, which is not to say other jurisdictions are not doing this. People are doing it as part of their medical review program. But this is really Ontario's time to be able to integrate these cognitive screening tools within our license renewal program, because we do have a group education session and we are capitalizing on the fact that we can have these seniors do these tests at zero cost impact. And I'm pleased to say that the preliminary results actually show that senior drivers that failed the in-class screening component in a range that warranted a road test, and I'll explain what those ranges are further into the presentation. But the results show that the new screening component is about 2.5 times more effective in identifying unfit drivers. So when we actually look at the number of people who actually passed a road test versus failed a road test in the previous program, and we compare it to the new program, you will see that it's 2.5 times better at identifying that. And I'll explain that a little bit as we go along. So before I go into the in-class screening component, if you guys have a piece of paper handy, and if not, I mean, I could also get a volunteer to do this too. I have a piece of paper right here. Would anyone like to volunteer? You know what, there we go, right here. That's great. Okay, so I'm going to read the instructions, and you guys can go ahead and we'll talk a little bit about this. Okay, here are your instructions. Draw a large circle. Okay. Put all the numbers in to make it look like the face of a clock. Okay.
Just a little bit slower.
Mm-hmm. That's all right. Yeah. Draw.
Nobody else is doing it. Oh, is that simulator? They're all
Yeah.
over the back saying, "That idiot."
Draw in the hands of the clock to set the time at 10 minutes after 11. Stop when completed. The form will be collected after 5 minutes.
Can you score it?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Absolutely, we can.
None of
Okay,
you-
everyone
None of you are a
done?
licensed medical professional? None of you are geriatric medical?
So I'll grab that.
You bet.
Yes. I am, actually, senior medical analyst. Okay. Now remember, our driver improvement counselors, they're not medical professionals. They are trained to administer this test. They have age sensitivity training, of course, and they're very good with their seniors. So there's a set of criteria to be used, and 3 to 7 points is a pass, okay? So in this particular case, we're gonna score it, and the first criteria is there a hand pointing to the 2? So we got a point there. Are there 2 hands? Point there. Are the hands pointing to the correct time? There's no tick marks, no, and the time is not written as text, so we're good there. So far that's a pass. You need a 3 to pass, okay? Now 1 to 12, the number is 1 to 12 only. Good. The numbers have to be spaced equally from each other. Relatively equally from each other, that's great. And they have to be spaced equally from the edge. So, may lose a point there. Okay, so this was clearly a pass. I want to show you some that were not clearly passes. This is what we're getting from our medium fails and some of our extreme fails. Surprising. Yeah. If you look at this one here, I'm not sure if you can see it. They wrote 10 after 11. The instructions were to 10 after 11. Okay. This one here, definitely, we don't have all the numbers in. We only have one. Yeah. That we can't even make out. Don't know what that is. I thought that would be interesting to see what we're getting back from some of our seniors, and clearly these tests do identify some impairment. We won't do the next one because it takes a little bit longer, but this is an example of the other test that we do. This is the letter cancellation test. Again, we're looking for visual, this is for speed, right? Normally it takes, we'll wait for questions at the end if you don't mind. Thank you. No problem. So normally, this should only take a couple of minutes. We give them 5 minutes, and astonishingly, the feedback I'm hearing from the regions is that it does take them longer than 5 minutes in some cases. Oddly enough as well, I talked to one of the other driver improvement counselors who said, you know, once you hit the line 5, they seem to drop off too. They're not able to finish, or they're missing a lot more at line 5, which speaks to fatigue. You know, when you're driving, you know, visual scanning, and you're not able to, it just becomes less refined. Okay, so this is the type of stuff we're seeing. Over 20 H's is definitely an extreme fail. 11, if you've missed more than 11 H's, then you definitely fail. So you have to basically identify less than 11. Or, sorry, not have omitted less than 11. Okay. So, the other thing I wanted to talk to you about is, you know, how do we know that we're scoring correctly? Well, we took into consideration, we did an inter-rater reliability exercise, meaning, you know, what is the degree of agreement between counselors when they're actually screening these components? And we took a look at, we had an audit, so basically we'd have these tests come into our safety policy and education branch, and we would rescore them, okay? And happy to report that there was 98% consistency in the scoring. So our criteria that we used was very well adhered to, and definitely it established a clear standardized scoring guideline, and it was very well received from our driver improvement counselors. They were able to easily understand the information and apply it. Now, another interesting story, this is just the reliability of scoring between two separate entities, Safety Policy and Education Branch and our driver improvement counselors. Now, we had an interesting story of two driver improvement counselors with one particular driver. So here's the situation. This driver comes into our group education session, fails within a range that warranted a road test, ends up going for the road test and fails, okay? This gentleman thought, I'm going to go back to the group education session. I'm going to try and do this again. Now, normally this would never happen. We have systems in place where they're not able to go in and do the test again and get a different result. But think about the opportunity here to actually see the reliability of our exercises here. This man managed somehow to get through the system. There must have been a glitch in the system. Only one. We didn't find any others. But when he did it again, he actually did worse the second time by a couple of points. But he still, the result was he needed to go for a road test. Different location, different driver improvement counselor. So it shows the reliability of these tests, that, you know, we had the same test delivered, the same result came out, that he had to do another road test. And of course, he failed the second time as well. Okay. So let's look at the cognitive screens. Now, we're not looking to capture the people that can't button their shirts, you know. These thresholds that we talked about, the 3 to 7 for a pass, we're looking for those drivers who have functional impairments in driving, okay? So we're not surprised to see that a lot of them do pass, because in our previous program, a lot of them did pass as well. Now, in the fail category for the clock drawing and the letter cancellation test, you'll see that there's a little bit of a reverse here. You'll see that more people failed in the medium range for the clock drawing and than they did for the letter cancellation, and then vice versa. Now, we can expect that because, again, remember what we said. They test different abilities, okay? So we don't expect to see that the same pattern amongst the fails. Now, the clock drawing test and the letter cancellation test, they're scored independently, okay? And then they're put through a decision matrix that combines the cognitive scores with the demerit points. Now, remember what I said earlier, that last consultant study said that a good predictor of future crashes, suspensions, and convictions was demerit points. So we included that in our matrix as well. So this is something that we developed and is being used now by our driver improvement counselors, and it's also being considered for use within the medical community as well, Dr. Mark Rappaport. So when we take a look at what happened, so we see here pass, road, pass, and you continue on. These are medical referrals. Road means referral to a road test. And of course, the passes, they can continue on and they can renew their license. So when we actually look at the rate of referral here, we see that 93.1% pass, 6.7% are referred to a road test, and a very small percentage are referred to medical review. So those are the real extreme cases where we're looking at cognitive impairment within the extreme range, okay? Now, interestingly enough, the 6.7% is a little bit higher than what we had in our previous program. Our previous program was about 5% referred to a road test. But interesting, like I said, it's a number of road tests. We haven't really seen an increase in the number of road tests. So even though we're referring more, a lot of them give up driving. They don't go ahead and do the road test. So, and we're gonna, I'll show you some other slides later on where you'll see that a lot of them drop off. And after the second attempt, it's virtually no one really does it. So there are the few that are persistent and will continue to do it and continue to fail, but. Okay. So if we look at our old program, our new program and our old program, okay, here's where we can clearly see that it's 2.5 times more effective. Okay, in our old program, the majority of them passed. Okay, 82% passed under our old program. Now remember, this is with the knowledge test, not the cognitive screening tools. In our new program, 43% are failing. So these are the people that were sent to a road test as a result of their in-class screening component, 43% compared to 18% in our old program. That's 2.5 times more effective in identifying drivers with cognitive impairment. So we actually took a look at some of the road test maneuvers and the driving errors that we were noting here. Clearly, there's some problems with negotiating turns at intersections. And that's also in the literature as well. So there was quite a high frequency of failed road test maneuvers in those categories there. And as I said, in the literature, approximately 20 to 35% of senior driver crashes are related to left turn maneuvers. And this might be because elderly drivers, they may have more difficulty assessing the amount of space or the gap required to execute a safe turn, or there could be reaction time delay. So here's where I talked about a little bit when I said about road test attempts. So it was about almost 4,000 road test attempts, but when you actually break it down by number of attempts per driver, we had 2,959 drivers attempted a road test. So you see the huge drop-off when you go to the second attempt, and then so on and so forth, third and fourth as well. So we see that about 990 attempted a road test more than once, and 41% failed their first road test attempt, so that's pretty huge there. And 39% didn't reattempt. So a lot of them either they're doing the road test and have decided, you know what, this is not for me, or they've talked to their doctor about it, and they've self-restricted and basically have given up their license. Now let's look at some of our medical referrals. Now remember, not a lot have gone to medical review. And normally when they do go to a medical review, we send them a cognitive assessment form. Now those that get sent to medical review, if there's already a case on them and it's not the group education session or the cognitive screening tools wasn't the trigger, then it doesn't go through this route. But if it was just specifically because of the group education session, then we will send out a cognitive assessment form to be completed by their physician. So what we found there, about 73% had cognitive impairment, or they made the decision to stop driving after being referred to medical review, okay? And that's evidenced by drivers failing to file the requested cognitive assessment. Okay, so 47 out of the 123 basically said, I'm not going to do this. Or their doctor has said to them, I'm not, you know, maybe it's time to give up your license. Or maybe the family has said, maybe it's time for you to give up your license. Okay, but either way, 49%, so we're looking at, you know, half of the drivers required to undergo that, were ultimately taken off Ontario roads. So we've suspended their license. Okay, so we took them off the road, or they've decided to not drive, okay? So again, we are definitely, this is another other evidence that we are effectively identifying the right drivers there. Again, they could be more self-aware of their impairment, because after you do a test, I couldn't do a clock, you know, I couldn't find H's, whereas, you know, when you have a knowledge test, or they're just sent to a road test because the driver improvement counselor thought that they should, there's no real evidence, even to the senior driver, that there is a problem. In this case, they're able to see the results of their cognitive screening tool, or they're sent for a cognitive assessment. You start the dialogue with the physician. Physician is now able to discuss with the patient, maybe it's time to give up your license, okay? So wrapping up, what are our conclusions? Ontario's unique multifaceted approach to senior driver license renewal is unlike any other license renewal program internationally. And I'm not just saying this to toot our own horns, really. The work that every jurisdiction is phenomenal. We are hoping to share these results at a 2-year mark as well. And any gains that we have, any insight that we have, of course, we would love to share with the rest of the jurisdictions. Now, the cognitive screening tools selected for use, as we mentioned, they were rooted in peer-reviewed evidence-based research. Like I said, we did the entire meta-analysis. We often get questioned, you know, why not use the Trails or the MOCA or other cognitive screening tools? Again, we did the research, we based it on predictive ability, but the bottom line was zero cost impact, and those two tools were the ones that came out on top. And the interrelated components of the program provide multiple opportunities to objectively, and that's the key word, to objectively identify drivers who may be at heightened risk of collision. The program doesn't work in isolation. You know, you have your tools, you have your referral to a road test, then you have your mechanism for those that shouldn't really be on a road test, because we don't want to make the Ontario public at risk by having these senior drivers on the road when they clearly shouldn't be. And as I said, the preliminary results do demonstrate that the new program is working. Like we said, we see more drivers are failing that road test, which means we are accurately identifying, or more accurately identifying unsafe drivers. So it doesn't end there. I mean, obviously, we are going to continue to monitor and evaluate the program. We will have a 2-year evaluation. It's a little bit more extensive, obviously. We will be looking at the driver record history of these drivers that are identified as having cognitive impairment, looking at their suspensions, looking at their convictions and their collisions. So that'll continue to happen. We're also in a partnership with St. Michael's Hospital, and we're going to combine. And so what's happening is that our partner, Tom Schweizer at St. Michael's Hospital, is actually using technology, tablet technology and MRI imaging, and combining all of that technology. They're going to look at the brain activation patterns associated with the clock drawing test and the letter cancellation test. So they're actually going to be doing the testing while in an MRI machine. to see what areas of the brain light up while they're doing it. And what that tells us is are we missing anything? Maybe there's other areas of the brain that could be activated, and we can be using different tests, or perhaps layer on another test as well. So this will complement the cognitive screening tools, and it, again, offers another objective way to measure cognitive impairment. And then the other thing we're doing, and we've just retained a consultant, and they are in the process of developing a pilot cognitive road test as an alternative to the existing one. So yes, we're seeing that this road test is identifying the unsafe drivers, that 43%. But maybe we can get an even higher percentage of those drivers. Maybe that those 53% that are passing, maybe our cognitive screening tools just hit the surface. Maybe we need a cognitive road test to take a look to better identify those drivers on the road. It also could be used as a vehicle for looking into conditional licensing as well, so we're looking at that avenue. So really, it's not the functional assessment, which I know is the benchmark, is the gold standard functional assessment evaluation, but this will give us that opportunity to further explore cognitive screening at the road test level and make it specific to those who have cognitive impairment, not using the same MTO road test that we use for our young drivers or we use for other testing requirements. Okay. Questions? Yeah. Yep.
I guess as a manager of licensing and dealing with a lot of seniors, is there anything or any thought that Ontario is doing with medical practitioners to give them more
Direction?
cognitive licensing to have an understanding of?
Right. So Ontario.
We get the
Yeah.
frustration for us is just, go do a road test.
Right.
Well, we're not the medical practitioner.
Yeah.
We understand that there are, it's even maybe dangerous to take that person out on the road to do the road test.
Right.
Where can we put some stops in before then?
So Ontario does do a lot of outreach with our medical community. Our CCMTA standards do recommend functional assessment centers, as you know. So we are working with our medical community to do that. The medical community is also aware of our cognitive screening tools, so much so that some of them are actually using our decision matrix. So they're using our cognitive screening tools, and then they'll determine whether or not to report to the ministry. We have mandatory reporting in Ontario, so we do get unsolicited reports from our physicians. And currently, there is a sort of a pilot program right now where they're actually looking at, they're educating their physicians and asking them to follow a certain protocol on, when to report and when not to report. And we also have a bill that's just recently been passed, so we're going to look at, mandatory conditions that need to be reported, dementia being one of them. And so perhaps there'll be some parameters around, when we do need to get that information to our medical review section. But again, so it's just a matter of working with our physicians and really helping them to understand, how it affects their functional ability to drive. And I think that's key. CCMTA standards, CMA guide. Again, so we do a lot of work with our medical community to make sure that they understand what the guidelines are, specifically looking at it from the licensing perspective. Most often doctors are looking at it from, the physician perspective. They're not really seeing how it affects their functional ability to drive. So when we get reports in with mild cognitive impairment, we don't necessarily suspend the license right away because we don't know what we're talking about there. Is it mild impairment, they can't button their shirt, or they can't do their banking, or are they getting lost? So we do send out a condition-specific form. It's very detailed. We send that to our physicians to help them decipher whether or not we need to proceed further. So that's one thing that we do. We do have a condition-specific form that guides the physician in giving us the information that we need to better inform our decisions. So for example, if we get, sorry? Yeah, Joe Zagman is our head of our medical review section. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, well, we do a lot of outreach, as Francis said, to the medical community, and the use of the condition-specific forms that we developed, one of them being cognitive, we developed 10. We found we were not getting precise information that we wanted. We align very closely to the CCMTA standards, and the forms were developed to help us be as close to those as possible in consultation with our own medical advisory committee as well. And the cognitive form has helped greatly in terms of identifying what it is we need to find out without us having to do back and forth with the driver and the doctor. As well, depending on the results of the cognitive assessment, we'll also put drivers through, if warranted, a functional assessment. And that's conducted with an occupational therapist. So there's an in-clinic portion, and then there's a road portion that happens with the occupational therapist and a licensed driving instructor who's been trained in what to watch for. That's just not on the cognitive. It could be for vision, it could be for adaptive devices, but certainly the cognitive is also one piece of it.
So, and just to build on Joe's point, so if they're not caught through our senior driver license renewal, then doctors do report to the Ontario through their mandatory reporting requirement. The process is the same though. So if they get referred to medical review, and we do get the cognitive assessment form back, and they do indicate that there's some moderate impairment or mild impairment, then we do most often send them for a functional assessment, okay, depending on what's written by the doctor. So regardless of whether it comes in unsolicited or it comes in through the group education session, the process for medical review remains the same. We are treating all drivers with cognitive impairment the same, okay?
Do you limit the number of road test attempts?
Currently, no. Yeah, currently no, but that's an option to explore. I mean, they are offered at no charge. So as you can see, if we go back to that slide, you can see that even the chance that they're actually going to pass whittles down, right? It looks like they've got a 50-50 chance after the second attempt, but, you know, it really goes down. I mean, most people don't go for the third and fourth attempt, but...
We're looking at the road
Just
test
a
now.
follow-up on that.
Mhm.
Any kind of assessment in between road attempts to say, okay, well, this individual might not necessarily be the greatest candidate for another road test.
So these are all options that we are exploring, because there could be an opportunity, for example, if they continue to fail multiple times, perhaps maybe that would be an avenue to go to medical review. So there are different options that we're currently exploring, and this is why we need the data, because we need to inform our decisions by this data. This type of data really helps us to understand at what point do we say enough is enough. At what point do we say maybe it's time that the people that are failing 4 or more times, we didn't catch them through the in-class screening component at the moderate fail level, but the road test is showing them that they're an extreme fail, and maybe they need to go to medical review. So these are all things that the data will help us to inform those decisions, and we'll have more of that data after the 2-year evaluation to really drill down on what it is that we need to do to better refine our program.
You know, just to add to that, I mean, and we're all in the same position. When you have a program that's already operational, you're very restricted. You're not inventing something new. So it was very hard for us. Remember, it's a screening, not assessment. Because the other question is, somebody fails miserably, how do you let them go in the car?
Mm-hmm.
Right? But it's not an assessment, right? Like many other people have. So now with the road test and a little bit more data, we're going to be a little bit more bold.
Mm-hmm.
We can. But like seniors are very sensitive to us in Ontario, I'm sure they're everywhere else too. Cost is another one.
Mm-hmm.
So what Francis didn't really, it was in the presentation, but we were asked to test seniors cognitively. No cost, no more people, counselors.
Right.
Jeff over there has the counselors. The population is growing, no computers, no this, no that. No, it really was unbelievable.
Mm-hmm.
But it worked out well.
Yeah.
And the last piece that's not in here, Jeff can attest to it, 'cause he's got the counselors. We went from 3 hours to 90 minutes. That was the bonus. So we can now cope in capacity in the future. So it really was a great use of
Yeah, and we're getting a lot of positive feedback from our seniors, because when you think about it, they had to study. Heidi's mother just did it, and you know they have to study. They have very anxious. They have to study for that knowledge test, and now they're not having to study. We do include practice tests online for the seniors, so they're able to go online and practice drawing the clock. The instructions are there, so there's nothing hidden there. They could even have a clock in the room, and the reason being, if you're cognitively impaired, that clock's not going to help you. So. Really, a real positive response from our seniors. Not a lot of issues there.
I gave it to my mother, right, 'cause she was
Yeah.
so nervous, she came over, and I said, "Okay, draw a clock." She drew a clock. I said, "I can't see the H's there." She said, "That's it." I said, "Yeah." She said, "I like a job like this."
Yeah. And to Heidi's point, the driver improvement counselors, I've done a little bit of, I've been at a couple of meetings with the driver improvement counselors just to get their feedback. And quite honestly, we had driver improvement counselors at the very outset when we started to train them on administering this, and they thought, oh, there's no way this is not going to work. It's just going to be, the senior's not going to like it. It's just going to be horrible. They didn't see how this would all work out, if there was going to be consistency in scoring. And now the feedback is amazing. The driver improvement counselors love it. They're able to score, and they're able to do it objectively and in a consistent fashion. Their presentation, like Heidi said, is yeah.
Were your counselors telling you?
No, I mean, she's hitting it, very much so. I mean, when we implemented the program, I think one of the lessons learned is the amount of time that Francis's branch spent on delivering the training session, driving consistency, going through practice sessions with the driver improvement counselors. They were change adverse. So when the new program came in, all the counselors, very few of them were on board. They were actually very reluctant, very skeptical. Within about 2 or 3 months, we actually saw a flip. Where they were all very, very appreciative of the program, because it was frustrating for them in those senior sessions, because when they're identifying somebody for a group education session, it's through language barrier, lack of participation. So when they're referring some of these folks, they're really not comfortable in some cases, assessing, is this person truly cognitively impaired, or am I just putting them through a road test simply because there's a language barrier, or simply because I don't have a confidence level that I've transmitted the right information.
It empowers them to make that decision, and allows them that opportunity to say, look, this is based on your test scores, not my personal bias or prejudice. This is objective.
What they were finding with the road test itself, the written test, was even in cases where seniors failed the written test, the road test, if it was a case where it was a language barrier and they actually sat down with the client and walked them through the test verbally, they were passing. These are people that have driven 30, 40, 50, 60 years. So the rules of the road really wasn't what, from the counselor's perspective, the issue. Because as soon as they took a failed senior and actually walked them through the test verbally, they were passing. So it was really, it was a good tool for them at that point.
Yep, go ahead.
I'm curious, how is the senior lobby accepting this? Is there some additional pushback that you're expecting? The senior lobby, the AARP equivalent?
In full support.
They are in full support?
They're in full support. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, we actually have not only, we had, what's CARP, or the
Canadian, yeah.
Yeah,
it's CARP.
well, we did a really good, look, we knew cognitive, the word is scary, right?
Yeah.
So we went over to CARP, they were on board, then we went over to like CAA, because they're members of
Yep.
seniors, they were on board. Then we went to the senior secretariat, then we briefed all of caucus, you can imagine.
Yep.
Because the first phone call was going to tank this. It was a lot of communication.
Yeah.
But, everyone says great, and the seniors love it.
Yeah.
They really do. I've sat through those senior sessions. It's only 90 minutes, they can do it, and they can self-select because it's online. They don't have to go embarrass themselves.
Yeah.
They really can.
If they truly don't want to attend the session, and then, they don't attend the session, then, they can decide that it's not for them. Absolutely. Go ahead. Right, their renewal notice. Okay, so it's the same as our previous program where they'd have to do a vision and knowledge test. They get notified, and they would have to do the group education session there. Yes, we do have regional offices across the province that do conduct these sessions. Yeah.
So, as I understand it, you use a current road test model?
That's right.
And you spoke about potentially developing
A cognitive road
So
test,
are you
yes.
getting pushback for failures that may not be reflective of their cognitive ability?
Not necessarily pushback. This is just us being proactive and just, looking at that 53% that are passing, and perhaps those people that are passing, there's some of those people that may have cognitive impairment as well. Is it truly, is our current road test truly a reflection of capturing those people with cognitive impairments, or is it just, rules of the road? Things like more complex driving maneuvers are not captured in the current road test. So more to do with attention span and negotiating turns, or navigating a little bit more using your executive functioning. Yeah.
I have a curious one. Have you seen any difference between men and women
We actually did a part of my analysis, and there was no difference between men and women. Yeah, that was actually a part of the analysis. Small numbers to really determine, at 6 months, it's not really something that you can look at and make some clear conclusions about, but yeah.
So have you seen a significant difference in your crash rates with that insurance?
Well, we haven't examined the crash rates because it's only been 6 months since the introduction of the program. Sorry, this is the 6 months, and I know it's been a year, but that's part of our next analysis where we'll be looking at the crash rates. We'll be looking at suspensions and convictions for driving related maneuvers as well. So that'll be a part of our second analysis. But we fully expect, given the previous evaluation, that those with demerit points and those that fail their first road test attempt are good predictors of crash risk. So what we do expect to see is those people that failed their first attempt are going to have higher crash rates. So that's one of the hypotheses that we're testing, with the data that we get.
But now, if those persons have failed the test, then they wouldn't be driving at that point.
They wouldn't be driving at that point, but we're looking at, they can reattempt, okay? So if they actually do drive,
And
Yeah,
pass on their second
that's
test
right.
when they
yeah, absolutely.
Any other questions? Francis, yes, Susan.
Do you have any programs that are encouraging the surrender of license, or are you finding that like some of those stats, it said it's almost like people are self-selecting to surrender?
Surrendering, I mean, other than our medical review program, and that's the other way, we have our 70-plus collision program as well, where they're required to, if they're over 70 and are involved in a collision, they also have to do some vision testing and road testing as well. And so we have a lot of drop-offs there as well in our collision program there. Mm-hmm. And again, that's another opportunity that we're looking at too. Currently, our cognitive screening tools are restricted to our senior driver license renewal, but we can also look at maybe our 70-plus renewal program, because currently they're doing a vision test, a knowledge test, and a road test. So we may be able to extend it to that program. So these are the opportunities we're looking at to extend it and cast the net wider, so to speak.
Yeah, maybe I missed this, sorry, but I just, when a doctor does initiate a report,
Yeah.
at that point, sorry, do you send them to the exact same session that everybody else does?
No, so the session is only for those that are renewing their driver's license at the age of 80 or older. When there's an unsolicited report, it goes directly to our medical review program.
And what does that mean, though?
What that means is that the unsolicited report from the doctor that says, if it's Dr. X says that Bernice has mild cognitive impairment or severe cognitive impairment, whatever the case may be, gets sent over to our medical review department, where they will read the report. Then they will send out a cognitive assessment, a condition-specific form, as Joe mentioned. That report gets sent to the form gets sent to the driver. Then they take that form to their doctor, at which point, if the doctor wants to fill it out, or if there's a discussion between the doctor and the patient, the information from that cognitive assessment form then goes back to medical review. Our medical analyst will review that and determine whether or not a functional assessment is necessary.
Right, and so functional assessment, like an occupational therapist?
That's right.
Something like that?
That's right. A lot of the times, the doctors themselves will have already sent them for or referred them to the functional assessment center, in which case we'll ask for the results. If the doctor hasn't referred them, then we would actually initiate well, not initiate it, but we would request it from the driver. It would be up to the family physician to set that up. Mm-hmm. Great. It was a pleasure. Hope you enjoyed that. Oh, go ahead.
Just have one more question. So are you going to be doing a cross-assessment then to see what the results of your cognitive testing is versus something that's coming in from a physician and the process?
So what's coming in from a physician, they don't always do their cognitive tests. So depending, it's not a fair example. So if you're saying if it's MOCA or TRAILS or something like that, they test different things. But we are looking at the results of the medical review. So when a report does come in, we are looking at the degree of impairment, for example. So if there's mild impairment, moderate impairment, severe impairment, and then we're seeing the same things on our road test, we're able to compare that. We're able to see, are we getting all the moderate impairments? Are we getting the extreme fails as well? So it's difficult to do based on cognitive screening tests themselves, but by the very fact that the doctor is actually saying there is an impairment, and we've identified that, that's our measurement of success right there.
And not potentially vice versa, so getting it back from the physician and actually putting them through this testing as well to see if the results.
Because it's restricted, it could potentially happen that way where we send them for a cognitive road test, absolutely. Again, we're just in the process of developing that, so instead of sending them to a functional assessment center, we could send them to a cognitive road test. So yes, I mean, when it does come back, we can better make some decisions there. Right now, it's just referral to a functional assessment center, but yeah. Okay, great. Thank you.
So, Francis, we have a gift for you.
Thank you.
On behalf of CCMT, I'd just like to give you this small token of appreciation, and thank you so much. It was very informative. Thank you.